So a word about fullness, because we have a big problem in the mission field in America and in the West. We talk about fullness, and we think, therefore, the fullness of the faith, you're embracing the full faith. We think that there's partial, we can partially embrace the faith. And we can certainly talk about knowledge about the faith in terms of partial and full. We can talk about the appropriation of the practices. You have, for instance, there was 40 years ago, 35 years ago, there was the famous group of Protestants who became Orthodox in 1988. And they had appropriated over 10, 15 years a lot of Orthodox things. They did liturgy like the Orthodox. They taught like the Orthodox. They just copied the Orthodox. So in that sense, they were acquiring a lot of things like the Orthodox, externally, intellectually. So you can talk like that, and you can talk about those things quantitatively. But this is not fullness. That's not what we're talking about. So when we say I embraced the fullness of the faith, you became Orthodox. And outside of that, there's not incremental, because it's a personal, intimate communion. Like you can't be partially pregnant. You can't be partially in communion. You can't be partially married with your wife, right? These are things that are talking about relationships and communion, and that isn't really quantifiable the way we try to make it. So just to make sure people understand, that's the fathers never thought, like, if you walk away from the church, you teach heresy. Jezebel was either in the church or she was outside the church. She was either Orthodox or she was not. There was not like an incremental aspect to her involvement with Christ. Christ hated the whole heretical teachings of the synagogue of Satan and the depths of Satan here. He didn't say, well, there's aspects that are true. Of course, the demonized girl that Paul encountered was speaking the truth. The demons say the truth. The demons know who Christ is. They shudder. And they recognize who Christ is. And they say, Christ, why have you come before the time? Does that mean there's partially Christians? They're not quite, like, they have a portion of Christianity or something? That's on that level. We can't talk about fullness and partial Christianity. There's only the person of Christ. He's all in all. When you go to communion, you don't take a little part of the Holy Communion. You take all of Christ. You commune of the body and blood of Christ. It's indivisible, and yet it's divided. It's a mystery, but it's indivisible. We can't make it into pieces. It can't be a little bit in communion. I think we really drive that home, because there's this idea, and it's spilled over into ecclesiology, and there's people who are preaching the idea that there's levels or degrees of being a part of the church. That's just not true. That's not the Orthodox teaching. It's not consistent with patristic vision of Christ and the body of Christ.